Welcome to week 12 of Explore the Bible. Excited as we are coming to the conclusion of the book. Last week we had Jesus on the cross in Luke chapter 23. Today we're in chapter 24 and we see a resurrection appearance, one that may be familiar to you, maybe read it several times before. We'll just look at it and maybe see if there's some things that stand out to us, maybe we pick out this time that we haven't before. Before we look at the passage, I do want to remind you and ask you, subscribe to our channel. Like, share, comment on it. That just helps us all kinds of ways. You appreciate it. So let's dig in to Luke 24. Verse 18 says, "The one named Cleopas answered him, 'Are you the only visitor in Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that happened there in these days?' 'What things?' he asked them. So they said to him, 'The things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who is a prophet, a powerful in action and speech before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him.'" So we're picking up mid-story here, right? Jesus has started walking with these two men who are on their way leaving Jerusalem and talking to them, and one of them says, "Don't you know what happened? How can you be? Everybody knows, right? You're the only person in Jerusalem who doesn't know what's going on. How do you miss this? And this is big. This is a big deal, okay? So I love that because it gives us a little bit of insight into what's going on in the city. You know, not among the story, not just within the story that we're reading, but beyond that story. And you see this, the evidence of what's the knowledge, right? People know what happened. They're aware of what was going on. This did not happen in some bubble over here where nobody knew what was going on. Everybody knew what was happening. The news traveled. They didn't have, media. They didn't have Facebook. They didn't have that. They didn't need it. They had word of mouth, and they told. Everybody heard the story. So Jesus asked them what, right? So at this point, they can't tell who he is. They see him. They know he's a man, but they don't know who he is. They don't recognize him. And so look at what they tell him. And I like this too. I think it's interesting. For Jesus to hear the story from someone else, right? What they have to say were the things about Jesus of Nazareth. He was a powerful prophet, right? A prophet who was powerful in his action and his speech, right? In what he did and what he said. And this echoes one of the things that you see, I think Matthew brings it out sometimes as Jesus would speak. He would say that people were amazed at the way that he taught with such authority. Not just what he did and his miracles, but his speech, the way he talked, it impacted people, right? And all the people, God and people are all amazed at that. And the chief priests and leaders handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. They have a very clear understanding of what happened, right? It takes you to the book of Acts when Peter stands before the Sanhedrin and says, "You're the ones that killed him. You're the ones that crucified him." There is a clear understanding here of what happened, that it was the Jewish leadership that put him up for death. They're the ones that sentenced him to death, and they're the ones that crucified him. Right? They see this very clearly. It says, "Moreover," now here we get the rest of their story, right? "Moreover, some women from our group astounded us. They arrived early at the tomb, and when they didn't find his body, they came and reported that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but they didn't see him." Okay, so this tells us these two guys were not just kind of people hanging out in Jerusalem for the weekend. They were a part of this disciple group that was hiding out, right? They were in the upper room. They were a part of that group. And you see what happened here. That they're telling the story of earlier in Luke, they're telling the story that we see, the women that went to the tomb early and didn't find his body. And then they come back and they say they saw a vision of angels who said he was alive. Why are you looking for the living among the dead, right? So this is what we've heard, that he's alive. It says, now, some of those who were with us went. Well, who would that be? Peter and John, right? Go to the tomb, and they found it just like that, but they didn't see him. So this is telling the story exactly. And one of the things that I think is really helpful for us is when we hear this story from so many different people, and they all tell the same story. They have different details. They tell it in a little different way, but the pieces are all the same. The major pieces are all the same, right? There is this nugget in there that you see, this kernel of truth that's going through all of it. You see that consistency that they're telling. Now, they're not telling it word for word. In fact, if they told it word for word, that would become suspicious, wouldn't it? You've got two kids and something breaks and they both tell you exactly the same story, they're both lying, right? You know that's the case. So this is what's, they're hearing this, retelling this is what happened, okay? So they invite Jesus in. They ask him to stay with them. They're going to have some bread, right? They're going to have a meal. It's too far. You don't want to go along. So he decides that he will stay with them. And then as they're there, right, it was as he reclined at the table with them, that's how they ate, they reclined at the table, that he took the bread, he blessed and broke it and gave it to them. And then their eyes are open and they recognized him, but he disappeared from their sight. All right. They're having this meal. They're not having the Lord's Supper. They're not having some special. They're just having a meal. But Jesus took the bread and he prayed over it and he took off a piece and he gave it to them. And in that moment, it's like when Mary Magdalene, when she hears Jesus call her name Mary, and she turns and she knows it's Jesus immediately. Even if she talked to him, thought he was the gardener, right? But when she heard that, when this happened, this clicked, right? Oh, that's Jesus. Immediately they recognized him. So clearly now, okay, for whatever reason, God has shielded their eyes so they can't recognize him. They won't recognize him. And then he is in this moment pulled back that veil so they could see him clearly. All right? They recognized him, but boom, he's gone. Immediately he's gone. Okay. When Jesus appears to the disciples, they kind of freak out and he says, look, they think he's a ghost. And he says, I am flesh and bone. Right? They think he's a ghost because he just appeared in the room, right? How does flesh and bone just appear? Well, this is resurrection body. This is God. That's how, right? So flesh and bone, he's clearly flesh and bone to them. He doesn't appear to them as a ghost. He's flesh and bone, and yet, boom, he's gone. He disappears from their sight immediately, right? They recognized him immediately. Okay. There's a couple of things that I want to point out from this. I guess one is sovereignty of God, that God is sovereign over history. And so he can be sovereign over every aspect of his creation, which means that he can hide himself from recognition if he so chooses. And he can make himself recognizable or reveal himself as he chooses. It's just what God does. God reveals himself as he chooses, right? We're hidden from him. If he wanted to stay hidden from us, we have no hope. We'll never find him. If we're playing hide and seek with God, we lose because he can stay hidden if he wants to. The fact that any of us ever recognize Jesus for who he is because God has revealed himself. He's made himself known. That's what happened here. He made himself known to them. Now they see him. They recognize him. Right? When they didn't have that chance. The second thing is, why leave immediately? Why disappear? An interesting question. I don't have an answer. I mean, I don't have the answer. I don't know that any one of us can say, well, this is why he did it. Other than to say that Jesus was being very guarded with his appearances, and yet appearing to those, it seems more unlikely to many of us, right? Why didn't he appear to Peter, James, and John first? He appeared to the women and to Mary Magdalene. Why? And, to these two guys, why? It's an interesting thing, isn't it? We measure things so differently than the Lord does. And we would look at his appearance in the manger and say, why there? Why not in the palace, right? Why to a poor couple, carpenter, and why not to someone wealthy or powerful? All of these things, they are the conundrum to us, I guess. And we don't have answers. We have ideas and guesses. But it does show us very clearly that God works in ways that are different than ours. His ways are not our ways, right? And we need to be understanding of that and expectant of that even in our own lives. That how God works in your life is not going to be the way you might expect him to work. And what he does in your life may not be what you think or what you would have done or how you would have done. It probably won't be how any of us would have. But that is the nature of God. Hey, I hope that helps as you study, prepare. Thanks for watching. I really do appreciate it. Do subscribe to our channel and be sure and comment and like it and share it. We appreciate that. Thanks. We'll see you next time.